area, welcome to Talk Back, representing your issues, your voices, your words, and your concerns, looking at local art and politics in your neighborhood. And here's your hosts, Anthony and Michelle.
Yeah, what up, Bay Area?
What's up, little baby? So good to see you again. Welcome to Talk Back.
That's right.
So guess what? I am so excited today because we got emails. We have fan mail.
We did. You guys hit us at talkbackcentral.com. Got a lot of feedback. Some of you thought Michelle talked too much. I agree with you.
He's just all excited because he got a little bit more fan mail. Just a little bit more.
Make sure you guys keep it coming.
I know. I'm going to be pouting, you guys. Come on, tell me something. Even if I said I talk too much. But actually, that's why we're so juiced today. We're just a little extra excited. My co-host is unusual sorts today.
Oh, my goodness.
But we're actually really excited, too, about today's show, which is about...
I think it's about what? The Vietnam War, but the effects of the Vietnam War on California.
Yeah, and we were talking about this a little bit before because we're really passionate about a lot of things, but Anthony apparently is not a huge history buff.
Hey, look, I gotta be real honest. History was never my thing in school,
but it's not for a lot of people because people think about history as being really static, really, linear from here to here.
But that's why I'm so excited about today because I had to do a lot of research, and today you guys will learn a whole bunch more too. Yeah,
but it was fun though because we got to go back to our high school years and remember what it was like to study Vietnam. So stay tuned. You'll learn a little something.
Hey, so right now we have a feature on the effects of Vietnam War. There was a fantastic exhibit. You guys check this out.
Peace.
I'm Charity Tews, and we're here at the Oakland Museum of California with the exhibit What's Going On? California and the Vietnam Era. Part of the intention of the show is to create a dialogue with the community and show a diverse range of voices and experiences about this enormous time in history that impacted California so deeply.
New Year, with half the garrison of Saigon on leave for the holidays, the Viet Cong struck. Cong units drove into the grounds of the U.S. Embassy.
While embedding itself in the national psyche, the war ignited a period of unprecedented cultural and political change. For California, it was the moment that its citizens, veterans, and arriving refugees would redefine the nation.
I think the question is often asked is why is this exhibit at this institution? Why would this institution do this kind of an exhibit? We are a museum about California, and it's very clear that the impact of the Vietnam era was greatest probably on California, and in turn California's impact on the rest of the nation was also very great. And by impact I'm thinking culturally, demographically, the food we're eating today, politically, economically. In so many ways that era affected us and in turn affected the entire nation.
I was active in politics during the 60s and 70s, and I was a student at the University of California, and that's my t-shirt, my sweatshirt. It gave us a great sense of power and optimism, and I think that's one thing that's lacking today. A lot of people don't have that hope, and because we were at in order to be active in civil rights, we had to have the free speech movement. And we were successful. We won.
He went into war at a very young age. I was 13 when he was killed. So, we hardly have memories of him because he was our big brother. He went off to war and that was it, He was just a kid, just out of school. Until at an early age, wanted to grow up and be a man and move away from home.
My part of this exhibit was for the kind of the Native American aspect, I guess. I had saved all my uniforms and mailed everything home to my mom, and I know she made a quilt out of all my uniforms. And, I felt it was my duty to go, but now my political views have changed quite a bit since then.
I'm the chairman emeritus of the Republican Party of Orange County now, and at that time I was just a busy, active young mother and housewife, but always very active in the party, particularly with Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon. By 72, of course, it started to be, when you were re-electing Richard Nixon, it was definitely still, we knew we weren't going to have anyone else. That one was fascinating because of the Vietnam War demonstrations that went on during that time. I mean, our buses, one bus was turned over completely. Ours was, the windows were broken in on the bus I was on. It was really amazing. And one night we wanted to go out to dinner, and they told us just don't go out because the demonstrators against Vietnam were so heavy and so thick. They'd go down the street with cans of paint poured over their head to look like blood. And it was scary. It was very interesting convention. The rest of them are usually just fun and games, really.
On that march, Ruben Salazar, LA Times reporter, was killed. He was, they shot into, they indiscriminately shot into a bar and killed him. There was a lot of controversy behind that. People said it was a conspiracy by the police department to kill him. I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, on the 16th of September, Mexican Independence Day, they had a parade, and we participated. The group of young men from a magazine called Consafos, we participated, and we carried this painting with us. It had 2x4s. We carried it on our shoulder, and as we went through the march, we got more and more people wanting to participate, and finally the painting got away from us, and it led the march, and it ended up at East Los Angeles College, where speakers started speaking against the war and speaking against the police oppression, and it turned out into another riot. So that's basically what happened.
I was 14 years old in 1967 when I got hit. I went and swam in the river the afternoon. And over there, over other side of the river, and I don't know, the village is peaceful. Nothing happened, and suddenly, they fire, over across the river, and then cannons started flying over, and bazooka started over. And when I heard that, I dived down the river, and I stayed down there, so low, and when out of breath. I just happened to came up, and the shrapnel went down right in my spinal cord.
Anti-war images have been memorialized in Americans' consciousness about the Vietnam War. Hollywood has resurrected the patriotic hero and the man who served, and scripted the nation's consciousness about what happened. The museum, in their exhibit, What's Going On, had the opportunity to represent multiple voices. The late Edward Said would say that cultural institutions oftentimes recreate imperial ideology. Is the Oakland Museum guilty of this?
I made this film because I wanted to tell the Vietnam War, tell a story about the Vietnam War from a Vietnamese perspective, and really from a family perspective. I need to tell that story to my kids about what my parents went through. And for me, I'd rather stay out of the politics because I don't know anything about that side of it. I didn't grow up in the heat of what was happening in America. I did not grow up in the heat of what was happening in Vietnam. I grew up with how it affected my parents and how they raised me.
When I began to make Hearts and Minds in 1972, the war in Vietnam was already the longest one that the United States had ever been in. But what I decided I wanted to do was to have my film ask questions. And the questions were, why did we go to Vietnam in the first place to fight the war? The second question, what was it that we did there in fighting the war? And the third question, what did the doing do to us as Americans?
In the end, 15% of the show was allocated to the Vietnamese Americans. How does the lack of accurate stories and images contribute to civic amnesia? And what is the responsibility of media, art, and educational institutions in helping the public understand the impact of war on other societies? How does the sanitation of these wars contribute to the continued atrocities abroad? I'm Charity Tews with Talkback.
Hey, welcome back to our show, Talkback. Once again, Charity Tews probing the minds of our viewers, asking some really good questions, which today you are going to get answered because we've got some great guests on our show. Let's start out here with Mimi Nguyen. You were actually a research coordinator for the exhibit, the feature that we just saw, as well Joan Berzin, who is an instructor of global studies at Vista College.
Correct.
Okay.
Welcome, you guys.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start the discussion with, so we can give our viewers a little bit of tidbits. Primary sources. What are they? Why are they important?
Right, as opposed to secondary sources. And
Right.
what are they?
Well, I consider myself part of the primary sources. I was born in Vietnam, and my family lived through the impact, the primary impact of the war, survived it, and we came to this country as refugees. So we have a lot of history and heritage behind that war. That's part of who we are.
Okay, as opposed to, so say, let's say I'm studying the Vietnam War and I have to do a report, and someone says to me, you can only use primary resources, and I've been looking at movies and articles. Are those primary resources?
Secondary resources. Primary is more of, for example, oral history, where you're going out investigating the stories by interviewing people and getting their perspectives. Yeah.
I think we could say that primary sources are participants. They're the people who actually did the things at the time and made the history. And the secondary sources are written by the historians after the fact to try to give a broader tableau, a broader canvas to show all the different things that happened and all the different voices and opinions that are there. So a secondary source would be a history book, and a primary source would be somebody's own account of what happened in their lives.
Now we saw a lot of perspectives in the feature that we just saw. Now, having worked on the exhibit, do you feel like there were enough primary sources represented?
Well, I don't know if the viewers know about the story, but I was actually dismissed from my position because I spoke out against the exhibit for not having enough voices. Actually, we have 1/6 representation of Vietnamese American perspectives in the exhibit. And after the exhibit was released, I went back to see it, and they gave us 4 more voices. So
you were shocked to see that.
So but I noticed that a lot of things that I complained about that were not in the exhibit are now in the exhibit.
So you did have an influence.
So you did actually impact, your concerns did impact the end result of the exhibit. So so we watched the feature, and there were a couple of primary sources there, but why is it so important, us here living in the Bay Area, that we specifically are talking about Vietnam versus, some hip kids in New York or Ohio or somewhere else? Like, why is it so important to our community?
To understand the primary sources.
Right, and also understand
the
primary
culture.
first accounts of Vietnamese and Vietnamese people. How does that relate to us in the Bay Area?
Well, Vietnamese are part of American history now. The people are part of America's history today. We have 1.4 million Vietnamese in the U.S., and we're the 3rd largest Asian population in the country. It's a growing population.
We did the research, and so half of them are in California.
That's right. And so we have a big impact economically, culturally, socially, politically in California and the nation.
So okay, thank you. You answered my question very succinctly. That was perfect. So that's the reason why. So all of us probably know somebody who's Vietnamese or Vietnamese American, but maybe have not taken the time to investigate their history, or probably better put a hidden history, something that we talk about in history books, but there's a lot of parts, stories, and that
maybe
oral,
left out a little bit, right?
Right, maybe left out on purpose, I don't know, but this rich oral history and the importance of oral history versus something, you know, that you maybe learn in a class or so forth. So there is one part of the hidden history that I wanted to talk about was these re-education camps. What is that for our viewers? Like, okay, what does that mean, and how does that relate to the Vietnam War?
Well, it's actually a very touchy subject, controversial one as well. But
there you go, stirring things up.
Always good in the hot topics.
As you know, a lot of Vietnamese Americans here came from the defeated South. So after Saigon collapsed, a lot of people who work with Americans, either they were in the armed forces or they were working with the civilian government, were put in labor camps to be indoctrinated so that they could adapt better to the new society under the communist government. And they suffer incredible hardship that I don't know I should go into now, but I can just say that a lot of them are left out of history books that we learn about in school today. And for me, I think that part of the history is erased. And when it's brought up, it causes a lot of discomfort for Americans.
Well, so, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Real quick, as an educator,
there we go.
how do you bring, we're always on the same wavelength.
But that's where I was headed, so go ahead.
Just what Anthony would say is, as an educator, how do you introduce that hidden, somewhat controversial
and make sure
history?
that more than one perspective is seen?
I think a lot of people hate history. I usually ask students on the first night of class if they hated it, and most people do, and I think most people do because they can't find themselves in it. That is, the history traditionally has been privileged people, males, white people, and that's not who most of us are. And so when we look at history and we don't see ourselves, we think, why bother? And if you think what history is, it's a series of stories, and the stories are woven together to form a tapestry or a picture that's much more inclusive. When we can do that, then we can get some sense of what really took place, and that's why primary sources are so important, because they're the actual people talking about what happened, not somebody else analyzing what they did after the fact and telling us how they thought or felt. And when we study history that way, we can be moved by it. When Mimi is talking, we can feel moved by it, and so then we might want to look at what happened to somebody who went through an experience like that. I think Vietnam is incredibly controversial. The war, we're at 30 years anniversary of the fall of Saigon and the end of the war, and the exhibit showed how controversial it was. And nobody, I think, felt satisfied with the exhibit because nobody felt that their story got enough play, got enough prominence, but I think it's because it's such a complicated story with so many voices. And I think as history teachers, our job is to say that there are many voices and many points of view and not one history and one truth about what people's experiences are.
I like how you bring up that, you said a tapestry or oral, basically a bunch of different stories, but it's interesting what you said too, that a lot of times this kind of binary perspective on a certain piece of history doesn't take a critical look at it, and it tracks people, especially junior high and high school, to think a certain way. I mean, myself, I'm American, but I did not know I was American until I was almost in high school, which is really weird. And one day when I realized I was American, and then I started taking the critical look, I'm like, oh, that's why I thought I was A, B, or C. So it's great, and actually the person that I can attribute to that was a history teacher in junior high. So thank you for bringing that to
quick,
classrooms.
you know, for those people out there that don't necessarily like to read books and go into the history that way, some of them look to cinema or Hollywood. Now, there's tons of movies out there. Good Morning Vietnam, Robin Williams through a perspective of a U.S. veteran. What are some movies or some resources out there for people to get a different perspective, somewhat accurate?
I mean, I hate to be to rain on the parade, but I think people have to read books. I don't think that you can learn things simply by going to cinema. I think that Hearts and Minds, the documentary that Peter Davis made, is probably one of the best because it has the multiplicity of voices. I think you see the experience from many, many different sides, but there's so many films on Vietnam and now by Vietnamese filmmakers, which I think gives a whole different perspective. I think one of the problems with films, and it's the problem with Hollywood, from my standpoint, and I'm an anti-war person, is I think it glorifies war and it glorifies soldiering, and it really minimizes the horrible effects of the war, both, of course, primarily on the Vietnamese people who suffered the most, but also on the U.S. soldiers, their families who lost people. I don't think a Hollywood movie can never give an accurate view of what the blood and the gore and the suffering that people go through. I think if people watch the whole range of movies, of course, again, we get the different voices and the different pictures, but we have to read books and we have to read people's accounts, and we have to study the subject very thoroughly, especially because if you don't learn from history, you repeat it, and we're in Iraq right now repeating many of the mistakes, I think, that we made
so
in Vietnam.
So the point that you're hitting, we have to look at history. History has put us on uneven planes these days, and so that kind of explains that. But another thing, to bring it back to Vietnamese Americans and Vietnamese people, okay, here we talk about segments of population, Latinos, Central Americans, okay? I could be talking about Salvadoreños, Nicaraguenses, Guatemalans, whoever. When I say Vietnamese, for our viewers, what segments, or what pieces or populations are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about the Vietnamese who became political refugees because of U.S. intervention in the war, and because of our government, the South Vietnamese government, decided they wanted unification, but not under the communist banner. So they sought foreign assistance, and they needed the U.S. help because North Vietnam was supported by the former USSR and China. So you're looking at a population who I feel that many people that I've talked to within the community feel that their history is often been marginalized, been misrepresented, even misappropriated in movies as well as in books. And I think when we look at the exhibit and in movies, the participants in the war, mostly coming from the South Vietnam, they are always used as a backdrop, or they're invisible and historically ignored, but they're not seen as real people.
Hey.
Yeah.
That was fantastic. I'm sorry to cut everybody off. We have a lot we can talk about. We didn't discuss, about 5 things on our list. But right now, you saw Charity a little earlier in the feature, but now you're going to see her again. She's talking back with you guys about the effects of Vietnam War here in California. What do you guys know? You might see your mama, you might see your uncle. Check this out.
Hi, we're here on East 12th Street in front of a Vietnamese market, asking people how the Vietnam War affected them personally and how they feel they're represented in American culture. Come on, let's go in and check it out.
That was hard. That they had to, like when my grandmother was younger, she had to watch over, 4 kids running and trying to, save themselves from the Vietnam War. Yeah.
A lot of war going on, and basically it's not really stable place to live. Yeah, that's the reason that we came here.
It's come to this Americans work hard, to get the money, work very hard, and then, but everyone come here, we have the future. Yeah.
Do you miss Vietnam?
Yeah.
The first time, I must say that we thanks, American people.
You what?
We thanks.
You think?
We thanks American people, because the American people, they're always open heart, open hand, open hand to help all the refugees on the world. American troops sent to Kuwait, sent to Iraq, maybe for oil, but Vietnam before no oil. I don't know why.
If you watch the Vietnam War movie, that's not the truth.
Right.
You won't see the whole truth about the Vietnam War when you watch the American-made movie. Because you look at from an American point of view to the Vietnamese point of view, it's way different. It's something that you're not telling the truth here.
Right. What can you tell us some truth?
Just talk about who actually killed the Vietnamese president. With the average, telling the American who actually killed the Vietnamese president, but we know who killed the president. It was just the CIA. Our country has ruled with Chinese for 1,000 years, then Francis for 100 years, then now American come over. Technically, they was trying to say that they're helping out the country, but they're actually not helping out. They want to rule the country. Because ruling Vietnam, you basically rule the whole ocean, the China Ocean, and you control what to go in and out. That's what they're trying to do.
You know, we were out here, lots of controversy, not a lot of people wanted to talk to us, but we did get some good answers. And back to the studio.
Hey, Charity was out there doing her thing again, but I gotta tell you, I saw a lot of dudes. Where are the ladies at today?
I know, ladies, you need to get out there and voice your opinions a little bit more here because we're getting tired of the male perspective.
Anyways, but we had some ladies here today, right?
We did, and hey, do you still think history's boring?
I do not think history is boring. I've grown up a little bit since then. Today was a fantastic show.
That's right, and it was a lot of information, so if you want to go back and kind of recap for us and go over some stuff, go to talkbackcentral.com. And we'll have it all there for you to revisit, because it was really some pretty cool stuff, I have to say.
But, you know, we didn't get to touch everything. What are some of the tidbits we left out?
Yeah, okay, my favorite fun fact was this one, is that California, richest state in the nation.
Right on.
Because of Silicon Valley, and some of the biggest contributors were Vietnamese scientists and engineers, actually.
Okay, I love finding out that Vietnamese-American scientists and engineers are all through the NASA aeronautics, astronautics program.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And PowerPoint.
PowerPoint.
By a Vietnamese person. So when you're at your boring 9-to-5 job, plugging it away, there you go, PowerPoint.
Hey, but next week, what? We have a night out on the town. We're not gonna be here in the studio like always. We're gonna go party, you know, do a little something. First round on me.
I need to get away, ladies and gentlemen. I need to get out. And also, I want to see what this guy has to offer on the dance floor. So it'll be a lot of fun.
I got moves. I might pop lock on her. I don't know what I'll do. You better watch it.
I hope you guys check us out. We'll be having a fun time in the East Bay.
Hey, we will see you next week.
Ciao, ciao.